differentiate them, but I'm pleased to introduce Paul Paul Simmons. Paul, I first met Paul at a Walking for Health um, training day, and then I listened to his talk on forest bathing on the Cornwall Science Community on a Zoom meeting, and it was just so interesting. And um, I don't know, it was actually so moving. And um, Paul has actually got an MA in Cornish Studies, and he is now doing a PhD about utilising the rights of way network um, to um, to mitigate against the effects of climate change and the ecological emergency. And so I'd just like to hand over to Paul to talk about forest bathing.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Nina, for all the information in the previous one that we had. I'm going to be talking about soil, human health and well-being, really, and it's a historic attitude to our relationship to soil, and finally the last slide will be a wake-up call, I suppose. This is from a non-scientific point of view. So as Lizzie mentioned, just I ran Walking Cornwall, I'm running Walking Cornwall for 20 years, and I'm looking at how we interact with the landscape. She mentioned the MA and the PhD, and I'm a practitioner of Shinrin-yoku, which is forest bathing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But we talk about 5 important relationships, and for my sins, I have just become a parish councillor for my parish. So the 5 relationships I'm going to be talking about are the physical components of soil, the practical, how we've interacted with soil, the metaphysical. As humans, we can orate, we can use words, we can paint, we can use art to discuss our interaction and how important soil is to our cultures. And then I will talk to you about my interconnections, and that will be forest bathing. And the last slide will be about the film Kwayana. So I'm looking at the physical first, and for those who are actually knowledgeable about geology will notice, besides the cuttlefish, that you are on the lizard there. In the middle, you've got serpentine, on the right you've got gabbro, and the top you've got basalt, and on the left you've got a mixture, because you had 2 supercontinents pushing together on the lizard, of which you can actually stand on a fault line of Pelurian Cove, and these 2 mega continents met. And what I'm going to talk about on this side, the physical, is that the geology, I think Connor mentioned it, the geology actually informs what soil. So wherever you're walking, wherever you're going, think about what soil you're on, or think about what geology you're on, because that's important, because that will tell you whether there's, if you go down to the lizard, some parts are being used for drying food, and others are not, and I'll tell you why. So here's the actual map, geological map of Britain. So if you look at London, you've got the London clay. Around you've got the chalk downlands in the lime green. If you go up towards the north of the map there, you're in the millstone grit areas, you're in the coal areas. But if we move down to the southwest, you've got the granite backbone that starts at Dartmoor, goes to Bodmin Moor, and ends up at the Isles of Scilly. But I'm going to concentrate on the southwest there, the furthest south there, and that's the lizard. So this is the geology of the lizard, and it's a map from 1904, and they still cannot work out exactly the theories of how it all happened, because a lot was happening. What we've got here are rocks called serpentine, gneiss, G-N-E-I-S-S. We've got other rocks, schists, and they're still trying to work out how it actually came up from below and actually was there on the landmass as an ophiolite complex, they call it. So if you concentrate on the middle there, which is the serpentine, you'll notice that if we go to the soil map, it's virtually replicated. Now this soil, which is on the serpentine, is not very good for growing crops, but the botanists love it. It's a crumbly soil, but you have unique flowers there, and you've got things like clovers, 20 different clovers, 3 that are unique to Cornwall, and even the lizard, and you've got the Cornish heath. So again, it's just underlining the fact that whatever geology you're on, the soil is unique. And this can even be shown here. If you get to the Helford River, which is a deep water river valley, you've got the Carmenellis granite, which is north, and you've got minor series and Gram Scatho series. Now, if you look to the right, you've got Morn and Smith. And about 20 years ago, I went to a farm, and the farmer was telling me that he was planting various crops in rotation, and whatever he planted in some of the north of his farm didn't necessarily grow in the south, and vice versa. And he found out that the geology he was on was actually on the line of the change between the Myler and Gram Scatho series. So again, it just underlies, if you go walking and you're looking at the vistas, just think about how the landscape is changing, and possibly it's to do with the geology and the soil. If I get to the practical, how we've interacted ourselves as humans, you'll see these are my lovely boots after a wonderful summer walk, and I'll say no more about that one. And I think Connor also talked about how we started interacting and growing soils after being hunter-gatherers. This is how, in different conditions, whether it's in wet conditions or very dry conditions, this is how a map of how humanity moved and started growing food from the various soils. Now, I've missed out 2 important cultures, which I will explain in a minute. So we've got agriculture, aquaculture, viticulture, which is very important to people who like salads, well, people who like grapes, okay, people who like wine, and regenerative agroforestry and no-dig. But the 2 I've probably missed out, which I'm sure you're aware of, is the industrial intensive, which is a triumph of humanity. And I say that firmly with tongue in cheek. And this quote, I was searching for where this originated, this quote. Generating 3 centimeters of topsoil takes 1,000 years. And if current rates of degradation continue, all of the world's topsoil could be gone within 60 years. Some people even think 60 years is a long time. And was it Maria Helena Semedo? Is it fake or is it not? But it basically opened up the narrative of what are we doing with our soils to feed everybody. And the alternative is permaculture. If there is going to be one book that you're going to read in your life and follow it, this would be it. Bill Mollison, who's no longer around with us. But permaculture, and for those who don't know, it is permanent agriculture. You work with the land, you don't work on the land, you don't impose yourself on the land. You spend a year before you start not doing anything, just observing. You're looking where the frost pockets are. You're looking where it's sunny at different times of the year, where the water lies, and you work with the soil. And this is a lesson to be learnt globally, and a lot of people have been doing this for a long time. So I think I'll leave you with this little bit here for a few seconds so you can have a look at it and make your own mind up. But it's a graphic, I don't think it needs any explanation at all. I think it really tells, in some ways, about the arrogance and craziness of humanity. So the metaphysical, how do we, the imagination, how have we as people with soul can explain our interaction and interconnection with soil? It's very important. It's our description of the earth and our place on it. And why is the planet therefore called the earth and not water? When there is 4/5 of the planet is water. So it does tell a lot about our interaction with soil and the earth. So I'll start with the mythology. I mean, we've got Demeter, the goddess of harvest in the Greek version, and Ceres is in the Roman. And on the right, you'll see Saturn, which, if I'm not mistaken, that is the original John Deere tractor. And by looking at the other side, it's a 2-cylinder. But Pachamama from Bolivia as She was the goddess of harvest over there. And Kokopelli, who you'll see, is always shown playing a flute. And he's from the southwest of the United States, always bent over and spreading his seed. And I will leave that there. But also the mythology, and I do not know the way to pronounce this. Is it Dadger or Dadger? But along here in Cornwall and in Ireland, it's the Celtic god of agriculture. I just love to this photo because it looks like the pig in the background there is a photo bombed. But it just shows again with the mythology how far back we've gone and how true it is to our culture to be wary of the soil and what it produces. We are interacting with it, interconnected to it. Same thing with art. We've got here Aboriginal art in caves where they use the black for the charcoal. And these three colours, well, the colours of ochre and yellow and white will also reappear in modern cultural interpretations. So these materials come from the soil, from clay and ochre. And here you see some face painting and body painting that goes back, and often in all cultures there's a lot of that. And again, on the right hand side, more modern interpretations using those same colours. And whether that's digital art or not, it just, the storyline goes back very, very far. So also the metaphysical, I'm glad, I think it was it was something that was said before earlier on by our mayor, and it was Wendell Berry. So I will read that again as well. The soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector, by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life. And he mentioned this one as well. If a healthy soil is full of death, it is also full of life. Worms, fungi, microorganisms of all kind. Given only the health of the soil, nothing that dies is dead for very long. And Shakespeare again, he's talking about that the earth is nature's mother, is her tomb. So regeneration is a theme of a lot of cultural connections to soil. Mary Oliver, she said, all summations have a beginning, all effect has a story, all kindness begins with a sown seed. And that's from what I have learned so far. And Rumi, if you ever have an argument with anyone or break up with somebody, always go for a Rumi quote, but this one is more like a millennial talking about be like the soil in humbleness. That speaks to me, and hopefully it does to you. And again, we'll go to people like John Clare, who's talking about the runoff from soil. White foam crested with the russet soil, as washed from new ploughed lands with dart beneath, then round and round 1,000 eddies boil. And Robert Frost, let the downpour roil and toil. The worst it can do to me is carry some garden soil a little nearer the sea. And this last one is more of an observation. It's by a science fiction writer called Bob Shaw, and I do like it. It says, I refuse to have an emotional attachment to a piece of ground. At one end of the scale, it's called patriotism. At the other end of the scale, it's called gardening. I think we can appreciate that. So I'll talk now about my connection with Shinrin-yoku forest bathing, which started in the 1980s in Japan. And it was really a reflection of what was going on in the Japanese culture at the time. And they have a word called karoshi, which means death by overwork. And it still goes on. And so the government decided to see what effects staying 2 or 3 hours in the woodlands or forests, which they have many different forests over there in different ecosystems. They found that this is, for me, a playful, clinically proven therapy, and they've proven it, and they are still doing this, and in over here in Europe. Basically, this is what its effects are. It improves your body's natural resistance to many stress-related illnesses through a slow reconnection with nature using all your senses. So they found that 2-3 hours of being in woodlands and forests would have beneficial mental and physical effects that would last long after. We're talking weeks after immersion in for 2 or 3 hours in the woodlands. And we have some wonderful woodlands here in Cornwall. So the metaphysical connections, again, as we went back to the mythology, is like the Greeks had the dryads. There are individual spirits in the trees called kodama. And the connection, again, obviously with soil is above, in it, below it, and it is central to the therapy, as I'll show its benefits. Here's some words you might have heard before. The smell of soil after rain is called petrichor. And it is one of the most basic of our senses. It is measured, and I think the geosmin is one of the bacteria, is measured in parts per trillion. So it shows how much we can actually smell and how unique our sense of smell is. So one of those bacteria is called Mycobacterium vaccae. And Mary O'Brien from the Royal Marsden, she's an oncologist, and she worked with those end-of-life cancer. And we have to be very careful to say that it is not a cancer cure. It is helpful as a preventative. And she proved in peer-reviewed stuff that it improves emotional health, vitality, and cognitive function. And I've got a list of all these places you can go to, various areas on the internet, and find and download these. And I could always help you with that. So what are the effects? In the end, 2 to 3 hours. These are some of them, and again, proven, clinically proven. I think everyone knows that everyone would always have these sayings: go out and for a walk and it'll clear your head, helps you think. People like Wordsworth would go out and he would write, I wandered lonely as a cloud. They needed to be there for many, many hours in the forest. Charles Dickens, many others who needed that, Kierkegaard, I'm thinking of. They needed to go out into the woodlands and forests, and they needed that connection. So it lowers the stress, it reduces the blood pressure, blood sugar levels, improves your cardiovascular, lifts depression and mood, improves sleep and memory, improves concentration, increases the natural killer white blood cells and the anti-cancer proteins. They work with the cancer proteins like granulysin. And the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight that we have in us, in our DNA. And the parasympathetic is the rest and relax. And we know that most of our life at the moment is spent in cities with our sympathetic nervous system. If you think that, I think the beginning of the 1800s, there was only 3% of the world's population were in cities, and now it's up to 50 to 55%, and all that entails when it comes to stress. If there's a second book you want to read that's going to change your perception, because this is what it's about, it's about The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wollobeen, who's a German forester. And it's all about how the soil above and below soil, how trees planting in will send messages for called phytoncides, send messages to other trees. If they're being attacked, for example, by another insect, they'll send essential oils, and they'll send chemicals out from the tree to other trees to warn them. Again, the mycorrhizae that's underneath the ground will show that they will be feeding dead trees for 200 years and even interspecies. So we're still researching on that, but it's a fascinating book. It's one that you'll write down so many things about it. And finally, Coin Squatzy, 1982, Godfrey Reggio film with Philip Glass's music. And it's Coin Squatzy means life out of balance. 1 second. Just dropped what I'm going to say just for this final slide. And I'll just read something that I was just writing about it. It says, we have soil disintegration and destruction, runoff through lack of trees and concreting over vast tracts of land, for example. And without protection, it's predicted there may be only 60 harvests left. One of the most important mitigation and adaptation problems humanity faces within the climate and ecological emergency is our relationship to soil. It's up there. And just having soil, how we build up and keep it, what we grow out of it, and how we protect the contents of soil is vital. So it's basically the psychology of our perspective to nature. So in finality, it says technology up until today defines humanity. How we decide to treat the planet's soil is an existential question. And the balance will be restored without us or with us. And we're the ones who have to have that choice. And we have to make that now. So hopefully that gives you a sort of history of perspectives of soil in 5 different ways. If you'd like to get in touch with me about the forest bathing, there's my email. And if you want to talk about the PhD, about using the rights of way system here in all the parishes in Cornwall to transition to a low carbon economy within the climate and ecological emergency, that's also my email. Thank you for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Don't go away. We have a question for you. It's quite a long question. It's from Ben Grover. So you can probably read it anyway, but assuming that permaculture, so if we go back to earlier on in your talk, assuming that permaculture is not going to be widely adopted on a nationwide scale for the foreseeable future, have you got any thoughts on land sharing versus land sparing as approaches for balancing soil carbon storage, biodiversity, food production, and if I can add to that, mental health as well? What it means is, should we be putting aside land that we can commit to environmental objectives and intensely farm elsewhere? Or should we continue to try to achieve it all on every piece of agricultural land? And sorry for it being so long.
I'm trying to find it, but I think I'll answer
it's
that.
In the Q&A.
Yeah, in one way, when I take the train up to London and you notice how much land there is, I think there's no problems about how much land we have to actually work on it. I think it's a lot of legal stuff that stops us using. There's a lot of people who want to go back to the land, and I think permaculture is mushrooming, pardon the pun, but it's actually growing, and it's more important to people. I myself have just got raised beds here. I think a lot of people are realizing how important food is, and how we're only sort of 9 meals away from anarchy. So I think food security is very important. I think there's a lot of legal problems about that, about allowing people to do that. So I think that's one important thing that's in the way. And again, things like forest bathing is helping with the mental and physical health. I think people are realizing, especially in the lockdown, that walking has helped them, actually discovering all the footpaths. People, farmers and landowners can't believe how many people have actually been out walking and discovering their own footpaths. So I think we are being pushed into that way of looking at these questions, but we do need the legal backup from governments and councils to allow people to grow their food. And I think it's as basic as that. And the more they allow that, and less intensive farming, and more local CSAs, which help produce local produce, and people latching on to finding out where they can buy local food for local provenance, then I think it will increase. So I wouldn't despair and say it's not going to happen and it's permaculture is a minor thing. It's there. The tools are there to get people interested in it, and I would say that it will be a positive direction that we can go into. So it's there. The infrastructure is there to do it.
Thank you, Paul. And again, if anybody'd like to discuss that further, we'll address it again in the Q&A this afternoon. And back to Lindsay again. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, there is a local Truro Farmers Food Directory that somebody called Philip Pierce has done. And also my particular bugbear at the moment is that we don't have a proper community garden in Truro. We do have areas where we can grow food, but I'd like a nice garden with a nice shed and a kettle and a cat and a whiteboard and all those things. So that's my particular mission at the moment. So I can't wait to do a forest bathing walk with you, Paul. I mean, I go wandering in the woods and I love it, but I really, really want to learn about the mythology, actually. And I've got the book about the, is it The Hidden Life of Trees?
That's it, yeah. Philip
Yeah, I've got that one. I've started it. It's